The shadows beckon with hushed whispers as I wander the overgrown cemetery paths. Neglected headstones and crumbling mausoleums leer at me through the soupy fog, their weathered faces seeming to shift in the pallid moonlight. I know I should turn back, flee this place before night's shroud fully descends. But some strange force pulls me onward through the maze of derelict graves. The fog thickens with each step, becoming a cloying miasma that saps the warmth from my bones. The whispering grows more insistent, 1,000 indistinct voices speaking in eerie synchronicity. My heart hammers in my ears as I break out in a cold sweat. Still, I cannot halt my shuffling gait. Up ahead, the shadows seem to coalesce into a towering, arched gateway, its rusted iron bars hanging open in a dread, beckoning stance. Beyond lies a profane crypt, sinking into the earth, its steps carved into the bedrock itself. A sickly, greenish luminance flickers from the yawning portal, as if the depths of the forsaken tomb are lit by sputtering witchfire. Every rational instinct shrieks at me to turn and run, to escape this place and never look back. But I am helpless to resist the spectral summons calling me into that eldritch darkness. With heavy, inexorable tread, I descend the slick stalactitic steps until I reach the cavernous burial chamber below. The stench of dank decay and primordial loam assaults my senses, forcing bile upward into my throat. Rusted implements of unspeakable arcane rites lay strewn among the grinning, hollow-eyed remains, kept eternally restless upon their sepulchral slabs. In the center of the unhallowed crypt, a riven stone sarcophagus stands empty, pried open from within. As my gaze falls upon the vacated tomb, the rest of the terrible truth becomes horribly clear. The empty sarcophagus was not breached by grave robbers, but rather its unearthly occupant has at last stirred from its eons-long slumber to answer the profane call of its dark congregants. The whispering voices reach a crescendo of ecstatic gibbering as something massive stirs in the shadows high above the crypt, blotting out what feeble light remains. I stumble backwards, hands scrambling for purchase on the slick stone as my mind shrieks in primal terror. Shriveled, desiccated forms, the seeming architect of my nightmare visions, descend in a chittering, insectal cloud to circle their unearthed master. Their desiccated voices hiss in mounting frenzy as the bloated, festering presence at their center unfurls, calling to me in the Pratongal language of the worm-eaten dead. Join us. As I slip and stumble in my haste to retreat from the yawning aperture, I become aware of other stirrings in the darkness, other sarcophagi beginning to split asunder with the thunderous sound of shattering rock. I turn to flee, only to find the path back overgrown and impassable by an endless expanse of grasping skeletal hands jutting from the loamy soil. The whispering voices surround me, undulating with perverse ecstasy as their fell brethren begin to rise, clawing their way free of the hallowed ground kept sacred for uncounted millennia, until now. At last, the pitiless truth sinks its talons into what remains of my fraying sanity. This unquiet, overgrown place was never a mere graveyard. It has been a profane holding pit all along, keeping the slumbering horror confined until the stars were right for its unfolding awakening. And I have just played my unwitting part as the harbinger of its return. As desiccated, worm-eaten hands pull me down into the abysmal swell of their ranks, rising from the depths, I can only give voice to my torment in anguished, glass-shattering screams. I've had this nightmare since I can remember, I really never put much thought into why, until I saw it. Driving the back roads this past weekend, coming home from the city, there it was. The cemetery from my dreams. The arched gateway with its rusted iron bars, beckoning to me. The cold night air bit at my exposed skin as I made my way through the wrought iron gates of Oakwood Cemetery. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the weathered headstones, their shadows stretching out like gnarled fingers across the dewy grass. I shouldn't have come here alone at this hour, but a morbid fascination had gripped me ever since the disturbing dreams began a few weeks ago. Twisted visions of open graves, decaying corpses reaching out for me, the sickly sweet stench of death assaulting my senses. Each morning, I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding as the last vestiges of the nightmare slowly faded. At first, I tried to rationalize the dreams as being brought on by stress from my new job. But as they persisted and grew more vivid with each passing night, an uncanny sense of dread took root in the pit of my stomach. It was as if the graves were calling to me, begging me to seek them out under the veil of darkness. So tonight, I surrendered to the haunting pull, throwing caution to the wind as I ventured into the cemetery alone. Maybe then the incessant night terrors would finally cease once I faced my fears head on. The crunch of my footsteps over scattered fallen leaves shattered the silence as I wandered aimlessly among the solemn monuments. My breath formed wispy clouds in the chilly air with each anxious exhale. Although I tried to steel my nerves, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from the shadows. Suddenly, a snapping twig in the distance made me freeze in my tracks. My heart leapt into my throat as I scanned the darkness, straining my eyes for any sign of movement. After what felt like an eternity, I chalked it up to a stray animal scavenging for food and pressed onwards, determined not to let my imagination get the better of me. That's when I saw it. A freshly dug grave, mound of upturned earth spilling over the precipice. Its gaping maw seemed to beckon me closer, as if concealing some long-buried secret waiting to be unearthed. Against my better judgment, an invisible force propelled me towards the disturbed soil until I stood over the precipice, peering into the shadowy depths below. A putrid, cloying odor seeped up from the grave, reeking of decay. I retched, staggering backwards as I reflexively covered my mouth and nose with my hand. My head swam dizzily, and I stumbled, barely catching myself before tumbling to the ground. That's when the tremors began. At first, it was just a gentle trembling, like a rolling earthquake miles away. But it rapidly intensified into a violent upheaval, the very earth seeming to convulse beneath my feet. I collapsed to my knees, raising my hands defensively as clods of dirt and sod rained down upon me. Then, a skeletal hand burst forth from the fresh grave, bony fingers clawing at the air inches from my face. I screamed in abject terror, scuttling backwards as more desiccated arms erupted from the roiling ground, grasping and flailing desperately. More and more withered appendages fought their way to the surface, reaching out for me in a macabre tableau straight out of my worst nightmares. Just as a bald, desiccated skull crested from the upheaved soil, fixing me with its empty sockets, I awoke with a blood-curdling scream. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst from my chest. I bolted upright in bed, drenched in a cold sweat, whipping my head around wildly to regain my bearings. The digital alarm clock beside my bed read 3:16 a.m. I was safe in my bedroom, the disturbing images already fading from my mind's eye like a vapor. Just another nightmare. I rubbed my clammy face, trying to slow my ragged breathing. That's when I noticed it. A thin trail of freshly upturned soil led from the corner of my room. The shadows seemed to whisper to me, luring me deeper into the maze of dimly lit corridors. I know I should turn back, find my way out of this abandoned asylum. But some primal part of my mind compels me onward, as if the darkness itself is calling my name. With each step, the air grows thicker, more stifling. The whispering intensifies, a sinister chorus of unintelligible voices. I break out in a cold sweat as my heart pounds in my ears. Still, I press onward, feeling oddly entranced. Up ahead, a locked door creaks open, the rusted hinges groaning like the damned souls trapped within these walls. A sickly green light spills out, beckoning me closer. I should run. Every instinct screams at me to flee, but I can't. Like a marionette with invisible strings, some unknown force propels me forward. The room beyond is a charnel pit. Blood-stained tiles, rusted surgical tools, a rickety bed frame with leather restraints dangling uselessly. The stench of death and decades of suffering assaults my senses. My stomach churns, bile rising in my throat. Yet still, I cannot tear myself away. In the center of the decrepit chamber, a naked woman hangs suspended from the ceiling by cruel iron chains. Her lifeless eyes bore into me, endless pits of despair. Her pallid lips part, and a rasping voice that chills my soul whispers, "Join us." That's when I realize the dreadful truth. There's no way out. The asylum is not abandoned at all. It has simply been waiting for me to arrive and take my place among the rest of the poor souls trapped here for eternity. Slaves to the whispering darkness. The last shreds of my sanity unravel as anguished screams echo through the halls. I want to flee, to claw my way out of this nightmarish vision. But the whispering voices overwhelm me, crushing what little willpower remains. One of us, they chant in eerie unison. One of us. As unseen hands force me onto the blood-stained bed, lashing my wrists and ankles to the restraints, I weep bitter tears, because I know they're right. And then I wake up,